Oh, here we are. Uh, Supposedly, both Harry and I should be here.
I am here.
Yes, and
Can
I'm here too, but I can't see us.
you can't
I
see me? What? What?
think
What?
I've actually blocked us out. No, it's all right. Stay where you are. Stay you are. We're live, all right. It's just our I managed to cover us up somehow, and all I've got to do is find out how to uncover us, so that they can see our beautiful faces. Ah. I don't know why. Oh, there we are. There we are. You see, just at the flick of a mere finger. How are you, Harry?
I'm just fine, just fine. It's you that I'm worried about. You've been
Oh,
having.
yeah, I know. It's been a Monday morning. Believe me, everything has had a headache this morning. Nothing has ever gone. But the strange thing is, having built and rebuilt and refurbished castles, you'll appreciate this, I think. Of course, this is a 15th century hotel. And on Friday afternoon, well, Friday lunchtime, all our programs went skew with. And I kept on hearing people behind me, or at least somebody walking behind me, and I would turn and there was nobody there. And the hotel has reputedly got a ghost. I can only think that the ghost was there, didn't like what we were doing, and was being very pixie-ish and making things difficult. So
Well, this
perhaps
is
it's not
this is
Monday
per-
morning news at all. It's the ghost.
yes. Well, this is perfectly easy to explain. I mean, I don't know why such a fuss is made about ghosts. There's a very strong argument for their existence. It's quite simple, and of course, I got into this fairly deeply when one of our castles did turn out to be haunted. And I say that categorically, even though I didn't experience anything directly myself. So many people had the same experience over a number of years in one particular bedroom, including a High Court judge from Australia. So, not the kind of people that you think would just invent silly stories. And we came to realize that there was certainly a very strong argument for the presence of something supernatural. Whether we call them ghosts or not is another question. Um, and so that prompted me to dig into it a little bit deeper. And I came to a conclusion that we would be very presumptuous if we thought that other forms of life didn't exist in other dimensions. And the argument that I eventually came up with to satisfy my curiosity, and this is just personal to me, I don't wish to inflict this on anybody else, is that we understand quite easily that we live, human beings live, in, we sometimes talk about five dimensions, height, width, length, depth, time, and the fifth dimension where our imagination or our creativity will take us. Um, we already know that animals, some animal forms, do not live in those five dimensions. They can't conceive of what they're going to do tomorrow. They can't live in the question of time, and they can't conceive of something that they would like to do at some time in the future, to build a bridge over a river. And we know that instinctively some animals do that, but it's not, as far as we can understand, than the biologists, creative thought. It's simply impregnated into their existence. And so, if we can accept the fact that here on Earth we've got life forms, human beings, animals, plants that live in different dimensions or not the same dimensions, surely we can accept that there must be other existences which live in maybe 5, 10, 15, 25, 100 dimensions that are in the same space, perhaps, that we occupy, and we don't know of their presence, and they perhaps don't even know of our presence. And if we were to simply imagine that these dimensions, if just for the sake of graphic argument, were little balls or little balloons, those balloons sometimes maybe bump into each other and sometimes overlap. And sometimes a dimension which isn't in our consciousness will come into our consciousness, however briefly. And that is what's happening. It would be extremely self-centered of us to think that we were the only people on the planet, and the suggestion is that possibly that these people don't even know of our existence, and sometimes have funny experiences. They probably sit around the campfire at night and saying, "Gosh, I think I saw an Earth person, but I'm not sure. It looked very strange. He had
Yes.
2 legs, 2 arms, and 2 eyes." and
Well, yes, the idea of parallel existences has been taken quite seriously by scientists, hasn't it?
Have indeed, and we get into the field of alien life. Could there be life on other planets? Again, what an incredible, presumptuous thing to think that we're the only form of life in the universe, when the billions and billions, exponential number of possibilities that similar conditions could have evolved in planets many, many miles away. Get this phone. Let me get rid of this. I'm on the air, Steve. Yeah. So awful for that. Tell him every time not to call me, and he always calls me at this time.
It's about that time.
I mean, unbelievable guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so sorry about that. That's just the life of rural life in France. The phone never stops.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so anyway, back to alien life is another thing that we have to think about. It's far more difficult for me to conceive of the fact that we're the only people in the universe than we're multiplied many times over. And statistics could even argue that there are people called Keith Hayes and Harry Attertn talking to each other
right now.
that actually look like us. There's probably lots more that don't look like us, fortunately for them. But we've got to keep our minds open on these things. And you come close to experiencing something, or you have experienced it. To you, it's real. These weren't just imagined. But even if, okay, let me backtrack a little bit. Even if they were imagined, they are a creation of your mind. There's a dimension in your mind that felt there was a presence, and you felt that keenly. You experienced it. Therefore, is it real?
Yes.
Would
you embrace ESP in this argument?
I think I probably would. We know that the brain is electromagnetic in some ways, and why can't it transmit impulses and on wavelengths that cannot be measured by traditional electronics? It's entirely possible, and I think the older we get, the less fixed we should be in our ways, and the more open we should be. Being sure of oneself is a privilege of youth, and maybe a healthy
quality of youth. Yes,
yes, maybe a healthy feature of youth. But as time goes on, as we get into our 70s and 80s, and soon for you and me our 90s, we've got to open our minds more and more and more to keep abreast of possibilities, different possibilities that must surely exist.
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, even in the non-ethereal side of things, if that's the right phrase, I remember in 1981 or 82, when computers existed, but They were great big machines and took up a big room. One computer, needed a room to house it. And I went with a bunch of journalists to Harland and Wolff, the famous shipyards in Belfast, which built the Titanic. And shipbuilding, of course, had more or less disappeared from British industry by that time. And what Harland and Wolff did, they did two things. First of all, they built what are known as air bridges. An air bridge is when you leave an aeroplane and you don't touch the tarmac anymore. You walk along a sort of a funnel into the terminal. That's an air bridge. And they actually invented those and manufactured them. But they also kept their IT department and developed that. And there was a very bright young man in charge of their IT department, and he'd invited us, and he marched us past these rooms with these big computers in, and sat us down for lunch. And he said, "I thought it's time for me to tell you that you just passed a mainframe computer, what's known as a mainframe computer, and that it won't be too long before you're carrying a mainframe computer in your pocket." So we all looked at him. This guy's absolutely mad. But in fact, we now do, and we call it a phone. It's all the things that he said, and he was able to cast his mind ahead, admittedly based on some practical experience, but nonetheless, he had nothing that he could see, nothing. All this was in his forward thinking, and he was so enormously accurate. It's incredible. So there are all sorts of different variations of whether it's a parallel existence, whether it's ghosts, whether it's ESP, whether it's visionary. And as you say, it is, as we enter our later years, based on our experience and so on, we should be the visionaries. We should be telling youngsters what they can expect.
Well, absolutely. And the gentleman that you're talking about, he had a concept, a vision of how it could work out. And along came, in the fullness of time, people like Steve Jobs and others who actually were able to transform that vision into in practical terms. And so we've got, the computer, we've got mobile phones, we've got all sorts of things which were unheard of. And when you really think about it, the pace of change is getting so quick these days. I can't, off the top of my head, think when Steve Jobs launched the iPhone, but it's not that long ago in terms of our lifespan. It's very, very recent. And how many evolutions has it had since?
I can remember when I first came back from Belfast, which was 1990, not that long ago, really. But when I first started to commute, if the train was held up, people would go along and say, "Anybody got a phone that I can borrow? Anybody got a phone?" And people would bring out a suitcase, and there was this huge thing that you held up to your ear. So that was in my time back in the UK, and I've been away for a long time. A lot of these things are happening. Tell me, Harry, what's your view on artificial intelligence?
What do I make of it? It's obviously happening. We're reading about it. We're seeing examples of it on demonstration. It's quite a big question. It's a sociological question, I guess. Is it going to lead to mass unemployment or higher productivity, or both? Are we going to move into a two-tier society like the bees? Are we going to have worker bees and drones? What is its impact going to be on life? I don't doubt for 1 minute that it's going to be with us soon. But are we heading down a track of Stanley Kubrick's 2001, where the computer, HAL, I believe is the name of the computer in the film, actually starts to direct and dictate to the humans? We don't know. We're on the threshold of something very, almost a bit spooky, I think, but you can't halt progress.
No.
And again, we've got to look at human development. You were talking about the telephone just now, and has anybody on the train got a telephone? When I was a little boy, there was only one telephone on our street. Everybody, if there's an emergency, and by golly, it had to be something of an emergency before any could go and knock on the door, and the one person who had the telephone. So we've seen developments like that. So no, artificial intelligence is here. It's with us. It's being refined at a breakneck speed. And yes, I think it will intrude into our lives in a big way. I hope not like 2001, but like the film 2001. But it's obviously going to change the way we think and act and behave, and maybe survive. Because the struggle of any living creature or living organism is survival. You can trace everything down. Backtrace everything to survival, I suppose.
Yes, I suppose.
Whether it's the pursuit of wealth or sex or you name it, it's all to do with survival, procreating the species.
So far, I mean, I obviously like you and like a lot of others, and actually, I think the older we are, the more we think about these things. Is how is it going to affect life? But I'm having a bit of fun with it at the moment because, I mean, it is very, very new to me. And these are chatbot things and some of the apps that you can get. And I thought, what would I like for Mirador Television? I would love a detective series. Now, where should the detective series be set? Well, obviously in Lewis. And when? Well, in sort of Norman times, the early Norman times. So I asked Chatbot, was he capable of creating a medieval detective? And he came back and said, of course I am. I said, well, do it.
Yeah.
I've now got a template I can't remember his name offhand because I only sort of did it the other day, and I've read it and I've got to read it again because it'll need some altering. But I've got a detective series and all done by AI and set in medieval Lewis.
Although many books have been written now by artificial intelligence or by other mechanisms, similar mechanisms. So an artwork, of course, has long since been done that way. Transformation of existing artwork, or even artwork from its original concept, is being done by machines.
But most of us haven't had the opportunity to do it ourselves because of the cost. Now they're offering these things for free.
Indeed, they are. But it prompts me to think of something, and that is that the people, these are all actually created by human beings for the moment. As I mentioned, Steve Jobs and his that type of person have had the technical knowledge, vision, and technical knowledge to create these things. Eventually, artificial intelligence will be recreating itself. It will procreate in some technical form eventually, I'm sure. But for the moment, we need the bright people who understand this to develop it. And so, are we not already developing into a two-tier society? Because of our age, you and I are probably less technically able to get our minds around some of these new mechanisms, and so the young people find it quite easy. They're developing that way, but then a lot of people are moving into away from education. This education seems to be becoming a two stream affair, where the intellectual elite theoretically go to university and supposedly get the better jobs, and we've got a dearth of people able to do basic tasks, which is a shame. So we're moving into a two-tiered society right now.
Well, I think that you're right. Very interesting because on a Wednesday, in this very time slot of yours, I have Dr. Mark Maybe, who I worked with in Notting Hill for a while. And Mark is a very innovative educator, and he is working. He's just retired, and in his retirement, he's working with two young men who raised £1 million to start lecture hall, less university, because
online
we that period when you had to have a degree in everything. A degree in bricklaying to become a bricklayer. And I mean, in the farcical situation of just no more than a year or two ago, where some chief constable said every policeman should have a degree. And the dearth of people capable of doing and available to do some of the more practical skills became very evident. And these young men are saying, hey, listen, we've got to fill this gap. So I don't know whether it's a two-tier situation, but certainly we are splitting again into what you and I would remember as, yes, you went to university if you were clever, and you went to, as an apprentice if your skills lay in another direction. So I'm perhaps returning to something, Harry.
Well, I think if we are, then I think that's a very good thing. We seem to. I'm not an expert at all in education, but it seems that we've turned our back on the grammar school system and almost turned our back on the technical school system that satisfied these separate needs in society, and we seem to feel that everybody should be almost leveled by the lowest possible common denominator in education. If we want to make degrees so commonplace that, as you say, you need a degree in bricklaying, well, I'm sorry, no, I think we're heading down the wrong track there.
Exactly.
And when I look at some of the academic papers that are put out by people with master's degrees, doctorates, the actual quality of the English that they're sentences which last a whole page, which have got no grammatical structure. Maybe there's a brilliant thought behind it, but their ability to express it.
Exactly.
Transform that into the teaching profession. How many people, probably good people, very bright people, know their subject from A to Z, but are quite incapable of imparting it. They can't share that knowledge with young children, with young people, or with anybody. They even though they're extremely skilled in their own field.
Yes, and I think that the other danger is the encouragement of these new technologies for a non-learning situation. For instance, I mean, a lot of teachers will tell you that they have great difficulty because the students will come into the classroom with their phone, hold it under the desk, and be playing games when they should be actually using it at least to help in the learning process. And I think that it's always easy, isn't it, to play a game rather than listen to something which may be stretching the mind and is going to be of use for you in later life.
But I think the question of telephones in schools and that sort of thing is more a question of discipline. Human beings, never mind children, human beings need a structure in which to live. We are imperfect, and in the sense that if we're just allowed to wander off, we're going to fall over, and we need a structure. I do believe that there should be discipline in schools. I'm not talking about beating people. I'm just talking about there should be a sense of order, and no telephones, school uniforms, all of the traditional old things. Even if I'm thought of as an old fuddy-duddy, this gives you all part of the sense of belonging, I'm sure, and creates a learning environment.
And I'm told, because you and I have been out of the corporate sector for quite some time, I'm told that managers have the same problem with some of their executives now. They come in and the phone goes under the desk. So even at corporate level, is saying to your staff, don't bring in a phone, falls on deaf ears. What do you do at that level? You can hardly spank them, can you?
Well, no, I think what happens is the people who are skilled at managing ideas and other people assume these management roles, and maybe that's their particular skill. The problem has always been, what do you do when you, let's say, running a carpenter's shop and you've got a brilliant carpenter and you decided to make him the foreman? Well, he has no idea how to handle people. So all you've lost is a good carpenter and got yourself a lousy foreman.
Oh, yes.
So we get into other theories here, such as lateral promotion, and how do you reward lateral promotion? And that needs a lot of study, though. There again, there's a minefield, because as this thought has pervaded modern business, the human resources departments have grown like topsy, and they've got all sorts of people theorizing that the most powerful element in a corporate structure now is the HR department. You look at the national health and people like that. I mean, they've got thousands, tens of thousands of people in human resources when they desperately need frontline nurses and doctors.
Yes.
So I can't push it that far, but I think we should look as to how the individual skills of each and every person can be exploited in the nice sense of the word exploitation, to the benefit of all concerned, and certainly to the benefit of the individual concerned.
Yeah. Well, I think the unfortunate thing is the question of status comes into it, doesn't it?
It does indeed, yeah.
Promotion, it means that the status in the workplace goes up. If indeed your skill level is just not suitable to the new status. It's a very difficult one. I mean, human status has been with us more or less since time began. And it's very, very difficult to eradicate that from the human psyche, I think.
It is and it isn't. We think we're entrapped in the Western world into having all of these different levels, whether you fancy titles and salary levels and all the rest of it, so that gives you the status that you're referring to. But in some Eastern Asian societies, it's quite different. Corporate structure in Japan, I may have mentioned this to you before, is very flat, meaning there only are about 4 or 5 levels of management between the guy on the shop floor and the president of the corporation. And this is reflected in their titles, in their roles, and in their behavior. The president of a Japanese company, big company, Mitsubishi, any of these people, you find them very often walking the shop floor. There's a physical and involvement, and I won't go as far as emotional, but there's a traditional flattening of the corporate structure, which I think is a very healthy thing to do. Whereas we've got assistant managers, deputy assistant managers, associate assistant managers, and every kind of, just put a new.
Actually, a good example of the distaff side is you were in the airline industry, so you'll be familiar with the concept of the shuttle system of aircraft. And British Airways introduced the shuttle not too many years ago between the key hubs in the United Kingdom, Edinburgh, London, Glasgow, London, Manchester, London, etc. And that included Belfast, London. And they had to abandon it after a very short period of time because the executives at Harland and Wolff objected to getting onto the plane and finding that the fitter from the shop floor was sitting next to them.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's healthy. I mean, and it's incredibly important that these people meet and talk and share.
Absolutely, but they resisted it.
Yeah, one of the best instruments that ever came down the pike, I think, for that was the British pub.
Absolutely, yes.
Everybody meets in the British pub, from the lawyers, the doctors, the solicitors, right down to the guy that's sweeping the streets. I mean, they have their own worlds that they go back to. But at least they meet and they communicate. Right. It's only just to talk about the soccer results of the weekend.
Absolutely. And in fact, I think that the pub did do a certain amount of leveling, because it's very difficult for the head of a big corporation to go in for a pint and say, hello, Harry, hello, Keith, and then if you meet in the street to say,
Yes, yeah. Well,
yeah.
is that?
Harry, now let's just go on to what you've been doing this past week. How are your two ladies? And bring us up to date with yourself.
Okay, well, the good news is that I've talked to the young lady at the tourist office. Her name is Anne-Laure Chausserie, and she's really first class. She's fluent in English, and she loves her town. She represents her town. She's what we call in French a guide conférencière, which means that she does guided tours, and she holds seminars talking about tourism. So she'll be highly qualified to come on, and she's going to be available the 13th of Monday, the 13th
of November.
Of November.
Right.
So she'll be with me then, and she'll be able to talk about Domfront-Paris, which is the town where we live. But I think beyond that, the whole concept of French tourism, and I'd be happy to participate in that myself, because having also run a hotel in France for 12 years, I have a feeling for what tourism means to this country. It represents about 10% of the national income. It's very important. And it is, of course, the world's leading tourist destination. They welcome 1.5 times their own population every year.
Really?
It is by far the world's leading tourist destination. Some people dispute that a little bit by saying that yes, but they're not really going to France. They're going through France to get to Spain, Portugal, Italy, or some other destination. But doesn't stop the fact that it is very much of a staging point, France, and so tourism plays a major role here. So yeah, it could be an interesting program when we get Anne-Laure on board to talk
absolutely.
about it.
I think, Harry, this is your show. You can do what you like. I mean, you can come along and say, Keith, this is what we're going to do this week. As a matter of fact, this morning we only had one of the barristers on because the other is in a very key case in court. But I actually just say to them, what are we going to talk about today? And what we talked about was a crowd, or at least thuggery at football games in the UK, and that was based on the fact that the news this morning really is part of the important news was that Bobby Charlton had died.
Indeed, and I've got an amazing picture of one of my children in Canada who went to a soccer school with Bobby Charlton. I wonder if I could. I don't suppose it's possible to show this. I'm going to
hold it up to the camera. We'll see.
I'm going to see if that's possible. Now then, let me see. How do we do this? Here we are. Now, can we? Is that visible?
Hold it closer to the lens. But oh yes, it is. No, move it to the right. Yes, that's it. Yes, oh yes. I mean, it is quite clear that it is Bobby Charlton, and there are some people in the background we can't determine. But if that is your daughter,
no, that is my son. One of my sons.
All right.
All three of whom ended up, including this one, playing on the club team that won the Canadian Championship.
Wow! Which club was that?
That little boy there now. I don't know that I'm doing this very and my fingers are getting in the way.
You just take your finger. That's it. Yes, no. Yes. We can see it quite well. Yeah.
That little boy is now turned 50, and still playing soccer. And when Bobby Charlton died, he immediately sent me that picture, and I'd never seen the picture before of him with Bobby Charlton. And he went on to have a good soccer career himself, not as a professional. He works in the medical field. That son, and the elder boy is a teacher, and but they're now they're approaching retirement. As that little child there was about probably say 8 years old when Bobby Charlton was coaching him. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, actually, I have to say that football provided me with a couple of um, coups, which only appeared later. But you recall that North American Professional Soccer League started in our time in the in Vancouver, and I don't know whether you were aware, but the the, the California team were called the San Francisco Golden Gales. Now,
Oh, yes.
do you know who the managers were of the Golden Gales and of the Vancouver Royals?
I can't remember that. The names mean something to me, but I can't remember who was running that show.
Well, Puskás was the manager of
Oh,
the San
Puskás. I
Francisco
remember
team.
him, the
Yes,
Hungarian
yes,
guy. Yeah.
that's right. And Bobby Robson was the manager of the Vancouver side.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I got a long interview with Bobby Robson, who later, of course, became the England manager and rather famous for it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's wonderful. That's a,
Yeah.
it's a funny connection with soccer. This laptop that I'm speaking to you on was a gift from my eldest boy in Canada, and he set it up for me. And so the actual what you call it, the code for entering it is Manchester 1878, which is the year Manchester United was founded. I mean, it's not bad. I'm a rugby man myself, but
Yeah, but
they're all into soccer in a big way, and all of them still playing. 52, no, 51, 53, and coming up to 60. And they're all still playing soccer.
ah, great
And
stuff. Yeah.
I'm proud of them. As I say, all three of them were on the club team that won the Canadian Championship way back when. I can't remember, but that was quite a big deal.
Where was that from? Vancouver.
Well, in Vancouver, for the whole of Canada, they went.
Yes, but where was the club team?
No, yes, West Side was the name of the club in Vancouver,
Right.
and they went on to become Canadian champions.
Champions.
I think the final was played back east someplace in Toronto or Montreal. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! Excellent.
Well, there you go.
Yes, yes. Right now, how do we get onto this? I don't know, but let's take it. We're talking about tourism, and in fact, I suppose that football has generated such a huge part of the economy now, has it not?
It is indeed. It's a big money business, and as we know by the kinds of salaries that the soccer players get, so the top level soccer players, and of course publicity, television advertising, you name it. It's a major business. But sport in general is a major business. And
Oh,
yeah,
indeed.
yeah,
Yeah.
depending on
Although I understand, it's funny. It has the same variations as business, ups and downs. When you and I were in Vancouver, ice hockey was a very big sport.
indeed.
Apparently, it is not as popular as it used to be.
Well, I've been gone from Canada now for 35 years. I've been back in Europe, for 35 years now, and so I haven't really been following ice hockey to a large degree, but it was always very popular in the east of Canada, much more so I think than in Vancouver. The I don't know how you feel about that, but I would hope that those teams, the Montreal Canadiens and others, are still doing quite well.
Yeah.
I used to live next door to one of the players, top players in Montreal, a guy called Rocket Richard. His name was
Ah, really? He
the,
was very famous.
the
Yeah.
Pockets Rockets, and he was.
Rocket Richard,
In
indeed.
fact, his kids went to school with mine, so there you go. I don't know whether he's still with us, as none of us are getting any younger, and yeah, which takes me.
I actually, when I was in this country, but I found myself in New York with some journalists, and we went out to watch the New York Mets play, and they were
Hmm.
playing the Montreal team. Forget what they were called. Montreal Metro.
Oh, yes.
Uh,
Um,
and
mhm.
the one of the things that really impressed me was the ground was in the flight path of JFK
Mhm.
or LaGuardia or one of the airports there, and these jets take off every 3 minutes, and these players are concentrating on playing professional baseball with these jets going over. I was very conscious of the jets, but they seemed not to notice at all. They were concentration on what they were doing. It was incredible.
Well, the mind is able to exclude unnecessary. You and I in the news business, how often have we worked in crowded newsrooms when we're trying
Yes,
to
that's
think
right.
through and prepare a story, and the noise, we just shut the noise out.
Oh, yes,
I
yes.
remember when I was quite young, first married, we had a house next to a railway station, and the steam train, noisy steam train, the engine stopped right outside of my bedroom window, and I never heard it.
It's,
I just was able to shut it out. I was no longer conscious of it,
yes.
and people would come in and say, "How the hell do you manage to live here?" I mean, that
Well,
noise.
actually, it's the same in Lewis. We lived in a cottage, a very nice little cottage, a nice part of the town. But the tunnel taking the trains out towards London came under the house,
Mhm.
and we were just not aware of it at all. But people
No,
who what the hell's that ramble?
well, of course, noises you can shut out, like nagging wives. You can actually you can close off to it. Fortunately,
Yes,
I've never had a nagging wife. I can,
yes,
um,
we, yeah,
and
we'll
so
extrapolate the train outside the bedroom window.
yes, right, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
uh, Harry, did you actually watch the final or the semi final on Saturday night?
Oh, absolutely. I was glued to the screen, and I found it a very interesting match. It wasn't much fun to watch. It was just a question of both sides playing largely defensive rugby. I think England missed a lot of chances just by constantly box kicking, and giving possession to the other side, but then defending quite strongly when the other side attacked, and not allowing the other side, well, South Africa, to develop its extremely capable three-quarter line. But it seemed that England didn't even use its three quarters at all. I never saw the ball get out to the wing. Well, I did once, and it was to a forward who had been positioned out on the wing. I didn't really see a game of rugby. And when the South African scrum began to dominate, and we got a number of scrum penalties against us. It was just a matter of Andrew Pollard's incredible kicking skills. It was a very just decision in the end as to South Africa winning, and in that sense, I didn't feel England exploited their capabilities
Opportunities, yeah.
except for the last 1.5 minutes, when suddenly, with the clock running down, and England started playing rugby for 1.5 minutes, and
Mitch.
they were brilliant. And they were just battering, and another 5 minutes in that game, and they'd have scored a try, another two tries if they'd continued. So the question is, why didn't they play like that from the
Yes, yeah.
beginning?
I
Answer
think
is
that is, and I suppose that I was as guilty as anybody was watching. My thought was, I hope they don't lose by 50 points because their track record to that point was not particularly good.
uh,
But they certainly, I mean, in terms of holding up their end, came good on the night.
Well, I think psychologically they went into the match as the underdogs, and therefore they were very much at ease within themselves. They didn't have a sort of a level that they had to maintain desperately, and so they were more relaxed about it. But the strategy of the game was totally lost on me. I guess that comes from the coach. They determine how they're going to play the
Yes.
conditions. the meteorological conditions certainly lent itself to the kick and run style of rugby and playing on the other side's faults with a slippery ball. But no, I don't think England expressed its capabilities except for the last 1.5 minutes, which were a joy to watch. But it was too late then. And
Well,
what's interesting, just to make
yeah.
a point here, what's going to be very interesting is the final, because you're going to get a team that the culture of New Zealand is that they throw the ball about, they move the ball, they keep possession. But possession is 9/10 of the law in rugby, in love and war as well, I guess. But anyway, and they hang on to the ball, they move it around, quick passing, keep a game of movement and flow. Whereas South Africa is more of a scrum, more solid, more the crunch type of rugby. You're going to got two different kinds of rugby come up against each other, and I think that will be a very interesting display. And one side or the other will definitely dominate, and it depends how each one adapts to what the other side is doing. So that will be a very, very interesting game. The England-South Africa game was not interesting rugby. It was a grand display by England. I think they did very well to hold the South Africans. They could have won if they just opened their legs up a little bit, or opened their minds up a little bit, and did a little bit more running. Yeah. However, it's over now. We'll see how they do against Argentina. Yes. Argentina is a side that runs the ball.
Yes.
So again, we're going to get a contrast in styles between Argentina and England for the third place. But the big game is going to be South Africa and New Zealand. And I've got to share something with you. I've got $10 riding on New Zealand with my neighbor. But anyway,
well, I always have a soft spot for the All Blacks because, as you know, I was their liaison officer in Vancouver. About 67, wouldn't it be? Yes.
Yeah, sure.
When we had it was the centennial. Canadian centennial, and so we had a visit for, or was it British Columbia centennial? We had all these visiting teams that year.
Well, 67 was the Canada's centenary. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yes, so I always am very interested in the All Blacks. So it'll be a fascinating game, but also of course, time goes so quickly. We're not very far away from the Six Nations.
Indeed, in January, February, is it February? I'm not sure.
Yes, beginning of February we start, I think, the first matches. So it'll be interesting to see how, so soon after a World Cup, how that may have changed the mentality of some of the combatants. Yeah.
I don't think it's going to change too much. I think they're going to stick with some of the old hands for the moment. It's a shame because they've got so much young talent coming up, and it's time they started to integrate them into the team. I feel that the England game is not as creative as it should be, and I blame that on the strategy and on the kind of players that we have in key positions. That is the most euphemistic way I can say that what we need is somebody much more electric, a bright, creative spark, and at the position of standoff.
I quite like seeing this young chap Smith play.
Me too. And I think that style of rugby is much more interesting, opening the game up, and we see this with the other teams. Why shouldn't we see it with Britain? Owen Farrell, solid, I suppose, but not creative. Not in any way, in my mind, creative.
No, I would agree with you totally. Harry, we've been talking for. Let me put my spectacles on. I think it's. We've been talking for 50 minutes. It always seems to go so quickly when we get cracking. Now, just remind us of the two ladies that you're going to inveigle on. One is your wife,
Yes.
Tell us about your wife again.
Mm-hmm.
She's from the South Pacific.
She's from the South Pacific. She was born in New Caledonia, which is a French island in the South Pacific, discovered by Captain Cook on his second voyage of discovery. But the Brits did nothing with it, so it was annexed by the French in 1853. And Admiral Dupont landed a boatload of sailors on the island, who were promptly eaten by the natives, which so he didn't like that. So he sent a larger number of sailors on board, and they ran the French flag up, and it became a French colony. Famous, really, in modern times because it's the world's second largest deposit of nickel. Very important now. We're getting into batteries and electric cars and that sort of stuff. And second only to Sudbury, Ontario, for nickel deposits. And so it's an interesting island, about 300 kilometers by 60 kilometers, and then it's maybe a little bit bigger than that, come to think of it, but very hot. And she left the island when she was
Harry. This is Lena, who is Russian by birth and is married an Englishman. And she brings me, she's worried about two things. One, yes, my single status. She's always trying to find me a wife. And yes, second, she's worried about how I eat. So when she comes into the hotel, she brings me a biscuit.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
Yeah, I left Moscow communist system. I hold my life British, I British accent forever, like Scottish accent, so many different lovely accents.
Very good. But she's real, obviously. She's not a fan.
Not taken anyway.
She's not a ghost. Well, that's jolly good. Anyway, I'll tell you more about New Caledonia when we get Jacqueline on. But I'd particularly like her to talk about the time we had when we created a Chateau Hotel in France, because she was the one that largely ran it, and amazing skill that she brought into that, which I didn't know she had, dealing with the public. So quite an amazing girl. She's French, she's a French national. She grew up in French, but she went to Australia to learn English. If you can learn English in Australia, but that's another story. And now she's fluent, of course, in English and one or two other languages, for that matter. But she's quite a remarkable woman. So yeah, could be a decent show. Just all I've got to do is to get her away from her gardening and her housekeeping and get her on, get her in front of the camera.
You've got several good shows lined up already.
Yes. Oh, by the way, one point on the 6th of November, I have a doctor's appointment, medical appointment, right on the time of the show. I'm going to try and move it if I can, but at the moment it looks a little, because seeing a doctor these days it's not as bad as it is in Britain. I understand.
It's not easy in Britain either anymore.
It's still fairly easy in France, but to change an appointment this close would be difficult. But I'll try. And if I can, I will. But
let me know. We can always switch you to another day. Yeah.
So, okay. But I'll keep you informed on that. Okay, Keith?
Okay.
Well, God bless you.
Next week, Harry.
Okay. Take care now. Bye.
And you too. Bye.
Bye.
Harry Attertn in Normandy. And as usual, fascinating experiences and stories. And you can catch Harry at 10 o'clock every Monday, except for the 6th, when he's going to have a stethoscope slapped on his chest. But so we'll be back. It's time for Liza Page, and we'll most certainly. Let me make sure I can switch us off when I have to. Liza Page next in about 10 minutes' time. So for the moment, after a very busy morning and an interesting morning, I think, let's say, shall we toodle bib? Yes, we will.